So as you may or may not know, this morning our speakers during our sermon time today are several members from our church and a few guests as well. Two of the 10 MCCPB congregants that met with the Maltz students in the Laramie Project to share their stories and life experiences as members of the LGBT community. Caiti Marlowe is a junior at G-Star School of the Arts, where she majors in theater. The Laramie Project was her first play. She has been involved in musical theater since she was 9 years old, and some of her previous Maltz performances have included High School Musical, Footloose, Cats, and Bye Bye Birdie, one of my favorites. Later in the service, we will also hear from Charlie Hammond as she sings "I Know Where I've Been" from the musical Hairspray. Charlie is also very active at the Maltz Theater, and this year alone she has performed in, or has been a part of, Pippin, Bye Bye Birdie, the Laramie Project, and Through the Looking Glass. Please welcome our speakers this morning, and we're going to begin with Scott.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I remember when I was a kid, and I used to always have this smile on my face. I was known for it. I was known for walking up to anybody in the grocery store, and my mother was quite perturbed at this, and talking to them, and being, "Hi, how are you? My name's Scott." You know, and in this day and age, it's scary when a kid can do that. But I didn't have a fear. I walked up to people and I just loved them. I loved talking to them. If I saw somebody crying, I was there with them, crying. I had these emotions within me that were powerful, and I didn't know how to handle them. I remember coming out of the closet in 5th grade. That's about 11 or 12. And I came out first to my friends in 4th grade as being bisexual, so I took that half step out. Eventually, though, I came out as being gay. That's right before middle school. That's right before we're all starting to attack each other anyways. So what I did is I put a big red stamp on my forehead with a target on it, and it said, "Hi, you can pick on me." But I wasn't starting to be picked on in 5th grade or 6th grade. I was being picked on in 3rd and 2nd because I walked up to everybody and I wanted you to be my friend. I was so happy and I just wanted you to be my friend. I wanted you to love me and I wanted to love you too. And that wasn't received very well. I was friends with the girls and I was friends with the boys. Well, being friends with the boys, you were labeled as gay. And I was like, well, I don't even know what that is. I remember actually asking my mom, what is gay? I don't remember the definition she gave back to me, but I actually remember more or less the definition I was given from my peers. You know, and it was to like another man, to like a boy. And I was like, whoa, well, that kind of suits. And I ran with it, I really did. But I remember that being picked on was something that definitely happened to me a lot. And it didn't matter what my parents told me, and it didn't matter what counselors told me when they told me that, sticks and stones can break your bones, but words can never hurt you. Please reverse that. Words hurt me more than a stick and stone ever will. I remember being physically hurt and knowing that that will heal. But when I was called names, I've held that. I've held that all the way till today, until this year. It's affected my life profoundly. So please never say that sticks and stones can break your bones and words will never hurt you, because it's the other way around. I know my bones will heal, I know my body will mend, but my soul wasn't. And I had this large hole within me. Anger, hate, fear, that's what I learned. I learned those things from everyone around me, and especially from the Southern Baptist pulpit and the Seventh-day Adventists, which were the two extremes in my family. It was fire and brimstone. I remember going to church and feeling guilty. And you don't go to church to feel bad. I recognized that very soon, and I didn't want to go to church anymore. My parents gave me that decision, and they respected it. My parents have always told me they will love me no matter what, and they have. I was born in 1991 here in Florida. I am 21 years old. Continuing on with my story, though, in 6th grade, I was actually an AB student throughout most of my life, and in 6th grade, I got 3 Fs. And that was because I was being bullied, and what I did is I pulled into a book and I just stayed there for my entire 6th grade year. Had to go to summer school, and my parents pulled me out. They pulled me out of public school and they put me in a private school where I was then able to gain some sort of self-esteem. But I was still angry. I was holding on to all that hate, all that fear. And I grew many, many responses to that fear and many coping skills that were not healthy for me. I came back into public school at about 11th grade. 11th and 12th grade were my last 2 years through high school, and I was in public school. And when I came back very fierce. I found the popular girls, and I made friends with them, and from there I became a bully. I became the person that I feared most because I didn't want to be the person that I feared. I didn't want to be bullied, so I became a bully. Anybody who stood in my path was torn down. I became very adept at looking at somebody and tearing them apart before they ever even spoke to me, and half the time they were trying to be nice. But I had already prepared an arsenal to defend myself. And that's how my life became, one big defense against another. And I never had a reason to defend myself half the time. I was prepared. And 17, I was in 11th grade. And I was hanging out with the cool girls, you know, and drinking and partying was a part of that. And I found amazing things to do. I drank and I drugged because it allowed to heal that hole that was inside me. That hole that I couldn't fill with anything else because I didn't have God at that point in time. You know, I thought he had turned his back on me when in reality he hadn't. He watched over me through that period of time. You know, and one of my favorite hymns is, Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary. And I realize now that he has been preparing me. Through everything that I've gone through, he's been preparing me to be what I am today. So I was this angry little ball just walking around. If you looked sideways at me, I was able to spit at you. I was just that venomous. And it came to a point that I had very little friends. I didn't have very many friends because people didn't want to be around me because I would even attack my own friends and my family. I remember looking at my mother going, I am always angry. And she looked at me and she said, well, why are you angry? And I proceeded to blow up on her and say, well, if I knew why I was angry, don't you think I'd have figured it out and gotten a solution to it? And she's like, well, calm down. And I'm like, no! Everything was wrong. Everything was wrong. There was nothing right. Everything was negative. How could anything bad be happening in the world? This was horrible. It was nothing but a negative viewpoint for me. And it was taught. You know, I grew up in Lake County, Florida. It's very conservative, it's very southern. You know, half the time the southern flag is flying more than the American flag. And I have seen KKK members in full regalia. I have seen people, you know, that won't walk around in certain areas. And I've seen complete white communities. And that's where I grew up. I learned to put on masks so I could survive. I learned to be something that I wasn't. And I pushed that good person in me, the person you see today, I pushed him far down, as far as I could, and I buried him beneath this numb being, this person who had no feelings, who wasn't able to cry like I did last night at the Laramie Project. That brought a lot of feeling to me, and I loved it. That was something to experience. So I moved to West Palm Beach last year on April 8th, and I'm drinking and drugging, and I'm having the greatest time of my life. Not really. I get this job. I actually moved away from a job working at a zoo where I got to spend time with animals. I got to see many great things and see a lot and touch a lot and experience a lot. But I called it a black hole of despair. That's what it was. And I moved away from it. I moved away from everything that I had up there because I needed a change. I carried me with me. I carried that hate, that anger, and that fear with me the entire way. So when I got here, everything was more accessible. I didn't have parents, I wasn't living in my parents' house, so I could do whatever I pleased. And I proceeded to drink and drug continuously. Continuously. Every day, I was on something. I wasn't living anymore, I was a zombie. October 31st rolls around of 2011, and it's Halloween, and we're going to a party. I proceed to take 2 benzos and drink a lot upon that. I black out at 10 p.m. and I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning underneath somebody who I'm fighting. I don't know who it is. I don't know why, but I know I'm about to hit him in the nuts. And I hear them say, don't do it. Don't do it. And I come to and I recognize that I'm fighting my best friend's boyfriend. And the reason I'm fighting my best friend's boyfriend is because I had pushed my best friend. I had spun around and shoved her so hard that she projected 3 feet back and hit a door. And he then stepped in and had to physically try and stop me, and I proceeded to fight him. And I'm not a fighter. I've never been in a physical fight until that day. So I'm sitting there, and I don't smoke cigarettes, but I was smoking a cigarette, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And I walk into the house, and I'm like, what's going on? What's happened? Why? What's going on? And nobody will explain anything. They're like, go to your room, Scott. Go to your room. And I had emotions that I hadn't felt in a while. I had this adrenaline pounding through me, and I couldn't do anything with it because nobody would respond. I couldn't work that problem out right then and there. And I knew what would happen if I didn't work it out. I would hold on to it, and my day the next day would be horrible. So I went into the kitchen and I grabbed a knife. I attempted to commit suicide in front of 3 people, causing post-traumatic stress disorder in multiples of them, at 3 o'clock in the morning on October 31st. I have these scars still on my arms. I was then had an ambulance called, and I was committed into a psychiatric ward. But before that, I was sent to the hospital. And I'm sitting in the hospital, and they say, you have to call somebody. So at 3:30 in the morning on October 31st, a Sunday, I call my mom. And I tell her I'm in the hospital, and she says, why? And I said, for attempted suicide, and the first things out of her mouth are, oh, Scotty. I have to live with that every day, that I hurt my parents that way. The other day, I sent out a text before I went to work, and it said, I love you guys, have a great day. No, I love you both very much. And then I put my phone down and proceeded to work. I got a call 2 hours later at my work because my dad thought that was the last goodbye. I proceeded in recovery. I knew I had an issue. I thought I had an anger issue, but what I had was a coping issue. I didn't know how to cope with life on life's terms. And I had a gigantic hole within me that couldn't be filled by anything but God. I came to this church. I had people smile at me and hug me for the first time. I haven't hugged a long time before I came here. Sincerely hugged, not just, oh, hi, how are you, and why? It was a hug that actually embraced, and you felt warmth from it. I had a person walk up to me, and they said, I love the light within you. And I had never heard that before. I didn't think I had a light in me. But I did. It's the smile, it's these eyes, it's the joy. And I realized that I lived a life of fear. I was shackled by fear, caged in anger, and comatose by drugs and alcohol. And that was my life. It wasn't a life. It was purgatory. So I began a path, and I accepted God into my life, and He has made me into a sanctuary, and He's still building. I get renovations every day, new tile rolls through. Courage. I have to do the next right thing. I can't stand aside and let somebody be bullied. And I also have to realize that all of you are human beings, and all of you have a connection to me, and everyone outside has a connection to me. Whether that connection be, and I'm going to wipe out 90% of the room, we're gay. Whether that connection be that we're white. Whether that connection be you have blue eyes and I have blue eyes. Or that connection is you love animals and I love animals. Everyone has a connection to you. Find that connection before you start to hate on somebody, before you start to fear somebody. And I try to do that every day when I meet somebody, is find a connection. Because if I don't, I'll find the disconnection. And that starts my old path of hate and fear and anger. I felt before this that I was in a sea and that I was treading water to stay above the surface. And finally, when I slipped below it, I had a hand reach out and grab me and pull me above it. And it said, go with the flow. And since then, I've been going with the flow. I come to church, I do service, and I try and be the best person I can be. And whether it is washing the dishes at 5 o'clock in the morning, that's the next right thing to do. Or walking up to somebody and saying, good morning, how was your week? That's love. And I'm trying to generate it in my life because I realize that love is what's going to heal me. And staying close to God is what's going to make me a whole person because I was broken. Thank you all for your love and support, and thank you for being here. And thank you for the Maltz Theater for having the Laramie Project. It opened my eyes on many levels. And I'm going to continue to change. And the person I am today will not be the person I am a month from now. And I hope it's a person that's for the better. Thank you.
It was an honor to talk to the students before they did their project. Reverend Leah called me up on the phone and asked me if I would do that. I said, sure, it'd be my pleasure. And I said, well, how long? She said, I want you to tell them about your gay life. And I said, well, how long do you want me to speak? She said, about 5 minutes. I'm 67 years old. 5 minutes, so I got the footnotes. The reading this morning said, quote, anyone who loves God must also love their brother and sister, unquote. How exactly do I do that? When Reverend Leah sent me the readings so that I could prepare to speak today, that was the question in my mind. How exactly do I do that? It may sound strange, but one of the advantages of being an alcoholic in recovery, is I know who the enemy is. I have heard that my disease is in the parking lot doing push-ups, waiting for me to come out, just waiting to take back control of my life. My enemy is in my mind, and it wants me to be scared. It says to me, who do you think you are? You think these people out here really want to hear what you have to say? Half of them are asleep. And what were you thinking when you wore that outfit today? Thoughts like these are the voice of my enemy. I have the choice to stop believing those thoughts and pick better ones, like, with God's help, I can do anything. I'm trying to have faith, but I still have fears. The fear used to stop me from doing a lot with my life, but I've learned to ignore the negative voice and say to myself, I'm afraid, so what? I've always been afraid. I probably always, in some way, will be afraid of something. It's not going to stop me from living my life anymore. I remember the first time I made this decision on the day of 9/11. When I heard of the tragedy in Manhattan, I realized how frightened I was. I went through a barrage of emotions, especially when I was informed that my friend had lost her husband in the first tower. I was angry. I kept telling people, I refuse to be terrorized. I may look over my shoulder a little bit more than I've ever done before, but I refuse to be terrorized. In the days following 9/11, the television images of the way human beings just instinctively respond to tragedy was uplifting, and it kind of melted away my fear. Something about seeing all these people ignore their own fears in order to help others made a connection to my spirit. I knew by watching all the compassion play out on the screen that I also had the capacity to step up and help my fellow man. It was inborn. Commentators were interviewing people who were being called heroes. All these heroes negated the label by saying things like, I just did what I was supposed to do. Or anyone would have done the same thing. Or, oh, I was just in the right place at the right time. They knew they were motivated by perfect love. Recently, I tagged along with my brother-outlaw, John. We had to travel to Oklahoma City for his work. We toured the large museum they had made to remember the Oklahoma City bombing. Throughout the museum, there were some incredibly compelling images of the destruction that is caused by one person. But the whole of the tour left me with that same instinct. When there is tragedy, the human spirit shines. There were literally thousands of images of the humanity that followed the bombing, from people who were in the neighborhood, who instinctively responded by loading wounded into their pickup trucks to take them to the hospital because ambulances couldn't respond quick enough, to rescue dogs with bandaged paws, still sniffing and digging through the rubble, hoping to find a person alive. There was that spirit, shining through the mess. I'm choosing to look at the love, not the tragedy. And now this experience of the Laramie Project. What an honor it is for me to be included in this. I have to admit, this old lesbian didn't see the same potential in humanity to recognize perfect love in a tragedy that involved a gay boy. I chose to believe my fear instead, but these courageous young actors in the Maltz Theater challenged my fear. Truly, these thespians, and anyone else involved in this project are beating swords into plowshares. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you for your courage in taking on this project that allows all people to shine. Now, if I'm afraid, I just have to remember that inside me there's something stronger than my fear. How exactly do I do that? How do I love God? By loving others? I need heroes to show me the way. So I rely on MCC to teach me about our hero, Jesus. I need people like these wonderful actors, organizations like the Maltz, my partner Lisa, who works in a place where the worst of humankind gets all the attention, but she goes there every day for the benefit of her family. And this congregation, who already have lifted my singing voice up from a fearful place, just by using their courage to shine. Thank you.
My name is Caiti. I was in the Laramie Project. And first of all, I just want to say thank you so much to every single one of you in this room. Actually, like, even if you didn't get to come to the show, it means so much that we had your support. And the way that you all came out to inform us at the panel discussions was extremely helpful to us. And I was so emotional, and it was an amazing experience, honestly. I may not be close with really any of you in this room, actually, but I feel such a connection to you all because of the support you gave us, so thank you. I didn't know about the Matthew Shepard incident at all when I first heard that we were doing this play. I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's all good. It's all good.
So does Charlie.
Oh, join the club.
Charlie could use a tissue too.
We're an emotional.
So are we.
All good.
Okay. So I didn't know about Matthew Shepard. I didn't know anything about this incident before I heard that we were doing the Laramie Project. And immediately I researched it and I read the show, and I was in absolute shock that something of this magnitude happened in this country to affect us, and I didn't know anything about it. And I think a lot of my peers didn't know anything about it as well, which it was just really upsetting. But I knew that it needed to be stopped, and I knew that this was going to be a great outlet to let out what we were feeling and let the community know the message that this is not something that can happen. And I think the Laramie Project is a great show in the fact that it really brings to light the issue of this hate crime and how it affected the world in a somewhat palatable manner. Because, I mean, if you're watching the news, you're like, oh, news, if you're in the theater and you have like a room full of people just completely connected to you and you can really connect with people, that's why I love theater. And so I knew I had to be involved in this project, and last year I had worked on the technical side, and this year I knew that I had to do it. And really this whole entire experience changed me as a person. It totally brought me closer with my emotions. It made me realize several days I came home from rehearsal just like crying, like, oh God. And it made me aware of the bullying that we have in our world today. And I mean, bullying has been happening for so long, and it's good to see that a group of young people can really like bring this message out to the community, because some of the things I see from my peers these days kind of scare me a little bit for the future. So the fact that I am around so many like-minded individuals in my age group that were willing to share this story with everyone to improve the future really gave me hope. And as they say in the show, the whole thing ropes around hope. H-O-P-E. I really love that. It's a great message. And I'm really glad it turned out well, and it really would have been impossible without your support, without your love, without your understanding here at the MCC Church. So thank you for everything. I love you guys.
Good morning, my name is Dean Nussbaum. I live here in Palm Beach Gardens, member of this church, and my partner is Ken Land. What I'm going to share with you today goes back in time a little bit, so I'm going to try to set the stage for you. First of all, there are younger people here that know very little about the draft. And if you were living back in 1968, where the year my story takes place, you were subject to be drafted once you turned 18 years old. And all men faced the draft once they were 18. That no longer exists today. If you were born in 1955 or after, you no longer had to worry about the draft, because the draft ended in 1973. So let's go back to the time that I was born. I was born in Findlay, Ohio, a small town in northwestern Ohio. I grew up with my mother, a single parent. Actually, my father was there, but had been institutionalized in a mental hospital, so I never knew my father. I had two brothers. My grandmother lived with us. My grandfather lived with us. He was an alcoholic. And my special needs aunt lived with us. And she had the mental age of about 4 years old. From the earliest memories, I knew that I was different from my brothers. My brothers liked sports. I'd rather stay inside and cut out paper dolls. So I knew there was a big difference. And probably one of the words you hear earliest that you know is a real negative word back then was queer. And the word gay back then still meant happy, carefree, having a good time. So anyway, I got pretty upset, starting to think, there's something really, really wrong with me. I don't like what my brothers do. I'm a little bit more interested in my male playmates than I am with my female. And then it became a fear. Then you're afraid that somehow somebody is going to find out. Somehow you have to hide. And so you go into the closet, and then you get angry. You get angry because of the deceit, because you're lying to yourself, you're lying to other people. You can't ever be yourself. You can't ever be who you want to be. And then I started having thoughts of, I think maybe I want to end it all. And this was elementary school. And those suicidal ideations continued through college into young adulthood. I hated myself. I didn't want to live. Somehow I survived, and I became a teacher. And in 1968, I was teaching in Zanesville, Ohio. This was my second year at teaching. I just started a relationship with a young man who left me, not even telling me he lived in a different city, just left me because his mother had found out about our relationship. So he left me to get married. And I just thought, my world is going nowhere. I just want to end it all. Fortunately, I called a fraternity brother, and I asked him what he was doing for the summer, and he said, I'm going to go to Denver and stay with David, another fraternity brother. And we had just learned that we were all gay. And so I said to Ron, I said, how are you going to get there? And he said, well, I'm going to fly. I said, would you like to drive? He said, sure, I can take more clothes. And I said, when can I pick you up? And he told me, and so June something, I went to Parma, Ohio, picked him up, and we took off across I-70, which really wasn't totally I-70 yet, and headed for Denver. As we're going into Denver, I don't know if you've ever seen eastern Colorado and Kansas. It's just bleak, and the tallest buildings are grain elevators. And you get into eastern Colorado, and it's desert. I mean, there's just sagebrush, and I'm thinking, where are we going? So anyway, we keep on going, and I didn't realize that we were going up in altitude. And all of a sudden, you go over this ridge, and you look down, and there was the most magnificent thing I'd ever seen. And that was the Rocky Mountains and Denver. And if you have ever been to the West, it is one of the most beautiful, most awesome places that you can ever be. And I got to Denver, and the first person I met in Denver, I'm still friends with. The first gay person I met in Denver, I still have contact with today. It was so different than Ohio. It was so free. And that song today that we just sang made me feel free. I loved everything about Colorado. I loved the blue skies. I loved the fresh air. I loved the mountains. I loved Denver. And for the first time in my life, I started to like myself. And of course, I immediately fell in love and was having a relationship. Well, back when I was living in Zanesville, I took my pre-induction physical for the military. So that's your draft physical that you take before you have to go. And if you pass it, later on you're going to hear from them and they're going to say, congratulations, now you get to go for your induction physical, and now you're off to basic training. And if I would have stayed, or if I would have gone back to Ohio, I had a teacher's deferment, so I wouldn't have had to worry about the draft. I wouldn't have had to go in. But if I stayed in Denver, I then had to face the draft. So I just thought, okay, I'm going to go for it. If I have to go into the military, I have to go in the military, but I can't leave Denver. I'd much rather stay in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains than the foothills of Appalachia. So I stayed in Denver, and I was having such a great time. I just started to enjoy life for the first time in my life. I started not to be so angry. I started not to be so fearful. Then I get my notice from the draft board. And so I think, okay, what am I going to do? Well, I figure I'm going to go in. When you go for your draft physical, now this was my induction physical. If I would have passed this physical, I was going to be on the next bus to wherever military training was for the Army. And you had to fill out a questionnaire, a physical questionnaire. And on that was a little box in front of question number, let's say 42. I don't know if it was really 42, but let's say it was question 42. And that question was, are you now having, or have you ever had sex with a same-sex partner? And everyone that I knew, gay or straight, answered no. And I sat there and I pondered it, and I looked around and I saw that everybody was going ahead of me and I wasn't going to get done in time, and I thought, I can't answer this question honestly. How am I ever going to explain to my family that I'm not going into the military? I can't be honest about this. And then it just was like a revelation. Dean, you have to be honest. And so I checked the box that I was homosexual. Then I got to take my papers down to an examining physician, and he looked at the question number 42 and he pointed to it and he said, what about this? And I said, well, overtly. He said, you mean active? And I said, yes. So he writes across my papers, active homosexual. And then told me to go on with the physical. If you've read the Scarlet Letter, I felt like Hester Prynne, that my Scarlet Letter was active homosexual across my papers that I was going to carry from place to place. So I took it in to the next part of the physical. And so they say, okay, drop your drawers, and they go around and they poke you and prod you and everything like that. And I think, wait a minute, I just put, I've got active homosexual in here. Why am I going through the rest of the physical? But they made you go through the rest of the physical. Then we had to take our papers to some little desk in the center of the gym-like place that we were in. And I made sure I got at the end of the line. So I'm at the end of the line, and then somebody, no, I won't go there. But anyway, I'm at the end of the line, and I get up to the desk, and I give the papers to the guy at the desk. And he yelled at me, when was the last time you had sex with a man? So that everyone in the room could hear. And I looked him straight in the eye, and I said, last night. And that split second changed my life. It changed my life, and that song that we sang just a few moments ago, that's how I felt. I felt free to love. I felt free to love myself. I had finally come out of the closet. And what happened next is I went through the rest of the, I still had to go through the rest of the physical. So they sent me to this room, and I'm standing there, and everybody's talking to where they're going for basic, and I thought, wait a minute, everybody's going for basic. What am I going? are they still going to take me? So I take the paper up to the desk and I said, what about this? And I point to active homosexuality. And they said, no, you're not going to have to go, but we're going to break for lunch now. Get in line to go to lunch. And I thought, now wait a minute, why did I have to go to lunch? But I got in line, and then the sergeant walks by, and I say to him, why did I have to go to lunch if you're not going to take me? And he said, well, you're going to get the bus back to Wyoming. I said, no, I'm not from Wyoming. I'm from here in Denver. My car's parked on the parking lot. I don't have to wait for a bus. So I said, okay, take your papers to such and such a room. So I did, and there was a female officer, and I gave my papers to her. And she said, well, we're breaking for lunch. And I said, wait a minute, the guy told me I don't have to go to lunch. And she said, well, what about your problem? And I said, what problem? And she points to active homosexual. And I said, I don't have a problem. I'm homosexual. And she said, well, I need to make an appointment with a psychiatric social worker for you. And I said, I don't need to see a psychiatric social worker. I just want to go home. And so I did. She said, okay, you're free to go. And I went home. But I think what I'm trying to point out here, and why I'm sharing this story with you, is that we all have gone through this. We all have fought with our sexual identity. And it's so difficult to come to terms with it. And a lot of us have resorted to drugs. I resorted to anger. I had uncontrollable rage. And sometimes it would just come out. One time in school, I was told I had to stay after school for talking, and I wasn't talking. And there was a substitute teacher. And so I went up to her and told her that I had a job and I had to get to work. And she said, no, you have to stay. Only the bus people can leave. And I just picked up the books off of her desk and I said, damn it, I wasn't talking. And I just threw them completely across the room. I don't know where that anger was coming from, but I would go through that over and over. And it was because I could not love myself. You have to love yourself. And the reason that I joined this church is because the foundation of Reverend Leah's ministry is love. Acceptance, understanding, and compassion. And that was shown so well by these students last night.
Yes, it was.
And as a former teacher, my chest was so full of pride for what they were doing. I looked around the audience, and the number of young people in that audience, it was almost like a miracle.
Yes.
It's like, how can this happen, that so many young people are getting this exposure, are getting this knowledge? And I thank you so much for doing what you did. So, I just want to close by telling you all that the best thing that ever happened to me was learning how to love myself. And because I love myself, I can love Ken, I can love our dog Winston, and I can love you all. Thank you.